The cold marble floors of the private clinic reflected the sharp, calculated world that Adrian Voss had built around himself, a world where emotions were liabilities and people were replaceable. As the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, Adrian was known for one thing above all else: ruthless decisions. Employees feared his silence more than his anger, and the day he walked into a room, conversations died before he even spoke. That morning, however, something was different. A dull pressure had been building behind his chest for hours, but like everything else in his life, he chose to ignore it. Meetings mattered. Deals mattered. Control mattered. Pain did not. Until suddenly, it did. His vision blurred mid-step in the clinic hallway, his grip loosened on the file in his hand, and before anyone could react, the powerful CEO collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. The sound echoed louder than any boardroom decision he had ever made. A young nurse rushed forward instinctively, her training kicking in before her thoughts could catch up. Her name was Lena Hale, known among her colleagues for her calm under pressure and her quiet resilience. Kneeling beside the fallen man, she quickly checked his pulse, her hands steady even as others gathered around. "Call for assistance," she ordered, her voice firm yet composed. But as she tilted his face slightly to assess his breathing, something froze inside her. For a brief moment, time twisted. Her heartbeat stuttered, not from panic, but recognition. She knew this face. She knew this man. And not from headlines or business magazines. This was the man who had once shattered her life without a second thought. Years ago, Lena had stood in a polished office, clutching her resignation letter that she had been forced to write. Adrian Voss hadn't even looked at her properly. "You're no longer useful to this company," he had said, his voice colder than steel. No explanation. No second chance. Just dismissal. That single moment had forced her into a completely different life, one filled with struggle, long nights, and rebuilding herself from nothing. But it had also led her here, to this clinic, to this exact moment. Now, the same man lay helpless beneath her hands, his life depending on her skill. "Stay with me," she whispered, more to herself than to him, as she began administering first aid. Her emotions warred within her, anger, disbelief, and something deeper she couldn't name. Yet her training overpowered everything. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here to save lives. And no matter who he was, she would not fail. Minutes felt like hours until the medical team stabilized Adrian and moved him into a private room. Lena stepped back, her breath uneven now that the urgency had passed. Her colleagues exchanged impressed glances, unaware of the storm raging behind her calm exterior. She wiped her hands slowly, her mind drifting back to the past she had buried so carefully. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Hours later, Adrian's fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open, disoriented by the sterile white ceiling above him. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. Weak. Human. His voice came out rough as he tried to speak. "What happened?" A shadow moved beside him, and he turned his head slightly. That's when he saw her. At first, his expression was blank, as if searching through memories he had long discarded. But then, slowly, recognition dawned. His brows tightened. "You," he murmured, confusion laced with something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Lena stood there in her uniform, composed yet distant, her eyes holding a strength he had never noticed before. She didn't smile. She didn't bow her head. She simply looked at him as an equal. "Yes," she replied calmly. "I'm the nurse who saved your life." Silence filled the room, heavy and unspoken. For Adrian, this moment was more unsettling than any business crisis. He had built his empire by controlling outcomes, by ensuring he was always the one with power. But here, lying in a hospital bed, he realized something he had never allowed himself to feel before. He had been completely powerless, and the person who held his life in her hands was someone he had once discarded like nothing. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice quieter now. "Why would you help me?" Lena's gaze didn't waver. "Because I'm not like you." Those words struck harder than any accusation. For the first time, Adrian had no response. The room felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of his past decisions. He had always believed success justified everything. But now, facing the consequences in the most unexpected way, that belief began to crack. As Lena turned to leave, Adrian spoke again, his voice almost unrecognizable. Wait. She paused but didn't turn immediately. I don't remember everything I've done to people, he admitted slowly, but I can tell, you weren't just another employee. Lena finally faced him, her expression softening just slightly, not with forgiveness, but with clarity. No, she said. I wasn't. But that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you do now, with the life you almost lost. With that, she walked out, leaving Adrian alone with a silence he could no longer escape. For the first time in his life, the powerful CEO wasn't thinking about profits, strategies, or control. He was thinking about something far more uncomfortable, regret. And somewhere deep within him, a question began to grow, not about business, but about redemption.